like us now to move to the next session. In this session, we'll be focusing on unlocking financing and support for young people. And the purpose of this particular session, we are gathered here to discuss how to mobilize finance and support to accelerate climate technology enterprises across the continent. I'd like to just give a bit of a background on the Youth Adapt program that the bank has been implementing alongside the Global Center on Adaptation within the context of the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program. Over the last 3 years, AAAP has been supporting young entrepreneurs to accelerate and scale their innovations in Africa. What we've realized, it's not the only right thing to do, but it's a smart thing to do. And we have seen triple dividends when you support young people. One, you get very quick results. In 2 to 3 years, we have concrete results. We have funded 41 enterprises. They have created over 10,000 jobs. They have increased their revenues by over 100%. And they've also been able to mobilize additional financing of about 7 million. So you get very quick results. And they are also building resilience at the community level. And this is just the beginning. We started a discussion at the climate conference in New York. And at the conference, it was a very interesting side event. And it was a side event that was focused on action. So the first thing the moderator told us, and that's David, who I'll introduce shortly, and my panelists here, is that this event is an action-oriented event. We will not just be talking, but we will take action. At that event, I shared the vision of the AAAP program to support 10,000 enterprises. And to support these 10,000 enterprises, we needed a minimum of $1 billion. But raising $1 billion is not easy alone. And when I look at the number of enterprises we've supported to date, it would take us 500 years to fund 10,000. So what that means, like our president always says, we have to hold our hands and to work together to make this happen. So since the side event at the New York Climate Week, we've been having discussions with a number of those at the panel, as well as others online. Given that we are all working towards supporting youth enterprises in Africa, if we work in isolation, we'll be duplicating effort, we'll be duplicating resources. How can we come together? So this session will be about how do we unlock finances? How do we provide support to young people? And to ensure that the support is not creating dependency on grant, but we are actually transitioning them to blended finance. So with that, I'd like to introduce my panelists. I have 4 panelists with me here. And online, I've got David, who will be speaking shortly. I'd like to start by introducing Alexey Shadrin. Alexey is the founder and managing partner of Evercity. Alexey, considering your experience with an enabler platform, so Alexey manages an enabler platform that connects banks, institutional investors, and SMEs for sustainable debt and carbon credits. So my question to you is, how do you see this solution helping us unblock $1 billion for 10,000 enterprises in Africa? And as you look at that, tell us a little bit about what are these innovative approaches and financial instruments that we can actually use to transition youth from dependency to being more sustainable and to look at different models of instruments. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here. And it's my 9th COP, so I've been following this discussion and developing solutions simultaneously to solve the problems that you mentioned. So going back to the first question on the practices that are there, I see 2 important things. So first of all, combining all these stakeholders together and helping youth SMEs to get financial knowledge, but not with like the old capacity building practices, but providing digital infrastructure and certain gamification where people who don't have climate finance knowledge, which is very specific thing, they can go through the stages and get climate financing by doing their core things, and so the tech does the rest. Important thing is decolonization of infrastructure. So infrastructure should belong to various African countries, but there should be interoperability. So all these regional infrastructures, national infrastructures, they should be somehow connected and should exchange data and value. So these are very important things. One important thing I want to add is yes. Hello, hello, yeah. So there are so many funds. There is GCF, there is GF. There are so many philanthropic initiatives. There should be one window for climate financing. Infrastructures being localized, independent, stimulating and empowering local players like local auditors, local project developers, local MRV solutions. Now with technology, we don't need them coming and doing all the job. These people can be there in the countries. This can provide even more jobs. At the same time, due to technologies, this can be all connected, and the funding should also come. And the matching between the funding and the projects should be somehow also automated as well. We don't need so many acronyms and learn all these complicated processes every time. So this is what's going on. These are the trends, and a lot has been happening already, so it's not just a fantasy. And we have right in front the Digital Innovation Pavilion, where we highlight some of these examples that are being done right now. So briefly, these are the key points I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Perfect, thanks.
Maybe I'll keep one mic. Can you hear me? So thank you very much, Alexey. You've talked about the digital infrastructure, gamification, and interoperability. But you've mentioned something that's very interesting, that we shouldn't have too many climate funds. We should only have one climate fund. I'd like you to elaborate a little bit more, because what we've realized, if I look at the ecosystem of supporting enterprises, we have many people supporting youth enterprises with finances and other technical support. What we've realized is that you may not necessarily need one program, but you need coordination. You need working together. So could you elaborate a little bit more by what you mean by having this one window?
Absolutely. So all these different climate funds and different opportunities, there in fact are just set of different criterias, which sometimes are very similar, sometimes not. And they can be put in the form of an algorithm, of a code, all these criteria. So if we have a one window data capture opportunity, so for example, different projects, they fill in the data into one window application, and then this application is connected to all these different criteria, all these different algorithms. And even without AI, with AI everything is better. But even without AI, the system can tell you which climate fund, which climate financing opportunity this particular project can qualify for, and automatically fill in the application based on the digitized criteria and algorithms that all these different funds have. So this is all not like really rocket science. This can be possible if there is such an initiative, if there is such a will. This can be done, and this system can provide recommendation, can fill in the application automatically, and then guide through the process. It just needs coordination of MDBs, DFIs, and maybe other players from the private sector.
Because that gives me a very good segue to the work that you're doing, Jacinda. Jacinda, you have been involved in efforts to raise substantial amounts of climate finance in emerging markets for many years. And I know that you're one of the champions of bringing ecosystem partners together to sort of like address the point that Alexey is talking about. So my question to you, could you please highlight one compelling example of success differently? And why do you think that particular model that you will share is important? A quick question to you as well is how then, with the context of what you have been doing, can we unlock a billion for 10,000 enterprises as a minimum in Africa? Over to you.
Thank you so much, Edith. I really appreciate all that you guys are doing together at the AFDB, and Alexey's amazing platform is really innovative and reaches out to the SMEs. What we've done, just to say, I'm with Ambition Loop as a finance lead and also with the Climate Champions team and Africa Finance. And we work together to do what we call the Regional Platform for Climate Projects. And that was an initiative around the 5 regions with the UN Economic Commissions to pull together climate, nature, positive projects. Because if you speak to the market will say, oh, there's no projects. The finance people will say there's no projects. The project developers will say there's no finance. And at the end of the day, there is finance, there are projects, but they're just not speaking to each other. Much about what Alexey said, they're not providing the relevant data, or they don't have the right metrics, or the projections aren't what the finance people want to hear. And so what we at the Champions have been doing with our partners like BCG and McKinsey and other consultants is really to shape the support and capacity building that these project developers and financial institutions need in order to really understand this climate market. So for example, if you have a pitch deck but it doesn't really properly reflect the impact that needs to be calculated or measured that will give you a valid entry into a certain investment tool, or if you're not able to really demonstrate the revenue streams, which some, an agroforester, in a smaller country has not been to business school and is not prepared to create the financial statements that are necessary in order to access capital. And so what we've tried to do is to support those projects by providing that added level of competence so that they can basically translate what they have into finance speak, if I can say it like that. And that has allowed us to open the floodgates of capital for the projects that we're supporting, because they're able to comply with the higher level of due diligence necessary for them to access the capital. So it's not so much that the capital is not there, but they're not really speaking the same language. And so what we've done at Ambition Loop this year is to try to take that to the next level and basically say, okay, there are pipelines of projects throughout the world, whether they're regionally specific, whether they're industry specific, and they don't really have access to a broader market or necessarily to the capacity building partners that can help support them. And so we're bringing them together kind of as pipeline partners. So they're bringing like CFA, the Climate Fund, Climate Finance Accelerator in the UK, and AFDB with the SME, and basically saying, okay, we can put all of these projects on a digital platform, similar to what Alexey's doing, is providing digital capacity, right? So there's an increased visibility. And also by bringing these projects onto the platform, we're requiring them to understand the data necessary for them to access the information. So we're giving them guidance around how to structure that data, how to put it together in a presentation that will be feasible, right? So they're becoming more bankable simply by complying with the basic structure. So sometimes it's not a capacity issue, it's more of a structure and how we're structuring these transactions. And so the more support that partners can give in this area, the more projects that can actually cross the line. And what I do want to say is that there's really almost 3 pools of capital, Edith, that we need to expand on. One is the pool of capital to the actual projects on the ground, making sure that more of that capital gets all the way to those landowners and indigenous people and communities. One is financing for capacity building for the financial institutions. So there's a lack of understanding about climate innovative techniques, carbon markets, whether it's sustainable bonds, whether it's sustainable insurance products. A lot of these are nascent innovations. And so they do take some upskilling of the actual financial institutions in the different regions so that they can actually absorb the capital that's coming from the Green Climate Fund and the other institutions. And then the last is really like yourselves. There's this stream of infrastructure players like myself, Alexey, and you who actually need capital to create what I'm saying, the highways that will allow the capital to flow from the projects to the financing, from the financiers to the projects. And so the need for the 1 billion is partly to fund the projects, but it's also to fund that infrastructure that's necessary to move into a new international financial architecture. We've heard a lot of discussion about reforming the international financial architecture. And to me, the most critical part of that is ensuring that nature-based metrics, climate-based metrics, land and water components are incorporated into the financing structures of all the banks, into the financing structures of all the insurance companies. And the more that we do that, the more that we incorporate those types of impact assessments, then the more those become valuable, right? And the more that that added value becomes a part of the system, and it really does transform so that we're not just looking at revenue, right? Like right now, if you ask about a project, what's the returns, right? If it doesn't have returns that the banks want to see, then, you know, they're not, or the investors want to see, they're not going to invest. But we have to restructure the system where it's returns and purpose. We somehow have to get a really good value on what is the purpose, the impact, the social, environmental. How can we put that on the balance sheet so that these projects that have a significant social impact are valued, you know, not just for having the return. So, you know, we're really working with a lot of project developers. No, here we go. And sorry, I guess it was telling me I need to wrap up. But basically just to say, you know, the way for us to access the capital is one, to help make sure that those projects, that the support for the infrastructure is raised to the level of awareness, and that project developers themselves have the capacity to make their projects more bankable with the consulting support that you're providing to your SMEs. It's all very critical to make this puzzle work together.
Hello? Okay. That's a very interesting perspective. And I remember when we had this discussion in New York, I likened it to Airbnb and Uber. You notice Airbnb and Uber, they do not own the cars, neither do they own the people. They own the platform that brings the cars and the people together. Same with Airbnb. So in other words, the platform that both of you are talking about is a platform that brings the investors and also brings the SME projects together and allows them to be visible, and also coordinates the pipeline partners, the partners that have projects, Youth Adapt and others, for their enterprises to then be visible to the potential funders. So that the 1 billion doesn't necessarily have to pass through any of the individual institutions, but can actually go directly to the enterprises. We're just making the connections happen. Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's an interesting perspective. I'd now like to turn over online to David Munir. David is the CEO of Green Catalyst Africa and also Bloom. David, I hope you can hear us. David, you have been involved in supporting climate entrepreneurs across the Middle East and also Africa for several years. What is one of the major challenges that you've seen that is constraining entrepreneurship and enterprise growth in emerging markets? And probably you could also tell us what is one way in which we can make the ecosystem be more efficient and impactful so that we're working more together rather than in silos. Over to you, David.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Edith, and everyone for the great discussion, the previous presentations. Can't hear me. Okay. Let's see. Is that from my side or from the technical team side?
We can see. We can hear you.
You can hear me now. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. First off, thanks Edith, and thanks everyone. Great discussion and great event today. It's been a wonderful journey and learning experience working around the Middle East and Africa for many years. And one of the things that has inspired us so much, and actually even inspired us in terms of the name that we chose for our organization, Bloom, is this concept of the super bloom. And for people who aren't familiar with the ecological phenomenon of the super bloom, the basic idea is that in a normal season, usually in a desert or some other arid environment, there's a certain number of blooms per square meter. But when the conditions are right, when there's the right amount of rainfall followed by the right amount of sunshine, etc., is you have this amazing phenomenon called the super bloom, where there might be 10x or 100x or 1000x the number of blooms within that same area. And this is part of our core belief that this is actually what's happening in a lot of these developing countries and emerging ecosystems as well, is because the amazing thing about the super bloom is that all of those seeds were there that were in that season of the super bloom, but they were just waiting for the right conditions to thrive. And we think that that also exists in the developing countries and emerging markets, where those seeds of potential, those entrepreneurs, those innovators are there, but we are not giving them the right environment to thrive. So very often people say, where are the entrepreneurs? Like Jacinda said, some people are saying, where's the innovation? Where are the entrepreneurs, et cetera, in these emerging markets? And we've seen they are there, but we're not providing them with the right conditions to thrive. So there's that also that saying that when people point a finger, there's three fingers pointing back at you. So when we were running these programs, we've been running programs in emerging markets for the last 17 years. And what we realized, one of the key challenges that we're facing is that how programs are getting run in so many of these emerging markets is they're getting modeled after programs such as accelerator programs that were developed in very peculiar places in these highly developed ecosystems like Silicon Valley or other highly developed tech and innovation ecosystems. But we're just bringing in some of the components and we're neglecting many others, and we're neglecting adapting to the needs of these environments. So for example, we might bring in an accelerator that's 3 months long because that's what we've learned how these programs are run, but we're neglecting the huge amount of funding and research that went into project-based learning, educational funding, research and development at the universities. There's a huge amount of public sector funding that has gone into Silicon Valley and these other ecosystems that we often don't have in these emerging ecosystems, but we're just providing that last layer, that 3-month accelerator program. So what we really think is an exciting opportunity, what we've been working on for the last 17 years, is bringing more innovation into how we build up the ecosystems and thinking how can we identify some of those challenges and then bring some of that entrepreneurial energy, that creative energy, that innovative energy to the ecosystem development side of things. And so in terms of some of the critical challenges, and this is some of the stuff that we spent time at in New York during New York Climate Week, and we're continuing forward with that, is seeing how can we bring people together to collectively identify the challenges that are really constraining innovation ecosystems in these emerging markets, in places around Africa, and then thinking, okay, well, what solutions can we come up with to not just unlock and help grow enterprises, but to help grow those pipeline organizations like Edith and Jacinda and Alexey mentioned, and also to help grow the ecosystems. So thinking, where is there duplication of effort? Where are we having these inefficiencies? Where could data effectively work to help bring some of that collective learning to these ecosystem efforts, and then really test them, deploy them, and then help grow them, not for a particular initiative, like Edith said, but for an ecosystem of collaborative initiatives. And so this is what we're working on at Bloom in terms of creating some of those tools, those shared libraries where people create content and then it's shareable with everybody. What are some of those assessment tools? What are some of those data tools that we can develop, but then also upskill and train and support all of that diverse network of accelerators and enablers across Africa to help there be this incredible growing pool. Already there's some great capable institutions there. How can we help more of them build momentum and grow and become these great ecosystem enablers on multiple levels. So I'll stop there, but there's some exciting discussions underway, and we're continuing that effort and really excited to engage more partners in building that momentum around. Jacinda said the highways. Maybe we can also call them the mass transit systems for the green enterprises and these enabling institutions as well.
Thank you very much, David. The Green Highway, possibly. I'd like to now move to Musa. So Musa Diouf is a Youth Adapt, one of the Youth Adapt beneficiaries or enterprises that we have been supporting of the 41. He's from Senegal. He's the CEO of Agri Expert Farming in Senegal. As a representative of Youth Adapt, Musa, could you tell us what impact the program has had on your enterprise? And also maybe some of the success stories you've had in raising financing. And then finally, if you could tell us how, as enablers in the entrepreneurship ecosystem, we could help youth enterprises better. How can we do things much better than we currently are? Over to you, Musa.
Thank you. Did to talk about
Okay, it's not working, eh?
price. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. I'm going to take it French. Maybe you will have a translation. Okay, thank you. So, thank you. Merci beaucoup, Edith, de m'avoir ici aujourd'hui.
Thank you very much, Edith, for giving me the floor.
Voilà, aujourd'hui, je suis Moussa Diouf, jeune entrepreneur agricole.
Today, well, I'm Moussa Diouf. I'm an entrepreneur in Senegal, and as Edith has mentioned it, I'm one of the beneficiaries of the Youth Adapt Challenge program in 2022, and today in Africa, there are many people who have projects, very innovative projects for agriculture, technology, for waste management. There's a lot of people who do have innovative programs, but the problem is that there are many issues as to access to finance, and there's also problems in terms of training. Youth Adapt program did help my company a lot, and it allowed us to access the finance and the funds, and it allowed us to scale up our program in several sectors. And in the beginning, our program was only developed in one place, and now I can say that we've scaled up to several sites in Senegal, and we have more impact with farmers. We have more than 20 farmers that are involved with the good farming practices, so a smart agriculture facing climate change, and we deliver resilient seeds with climate issues. So we were able to have infrastructure that were built for our company, and the Youth Adapt Challenge is not only money, it's also some mentoring, and we did receive a lot of training, a lot of help, a lot of strategic marketing that we use. The mentorship that we used as well was very useful, not just the funds. So to the youth, my message to the youth: if you're a young entrepreneur, you need to be working on the field. You need to show people that what you're doing, to show your project, to make it visible, and you need to show the impact of your project. This is the most important thing, probably. And I think if you show the impact of your project, you will be able to convince donors and they will probably be happy to help you and invest in your project. So this is what we do. And in order to access such funds, please make sure you have impact on what you do and show your impact. Show your impact. It's probably the key thing. And this is how we were able receive more from this program, and well, this really did help us reach more farmers in Senegal.
It looks like it's the last surviving mic. So thank you very much, Musa. It's good to know that your enterprise has actually expanded to other regions. And maybe in your closing remarks, you should tell us what should we do differently going forward in terms of support for youth enterprises. I'd like to now turn over to Adriana. Adriana is the Youth Leadership and Education Lead in GCA. Adriana, I know that you've been extremely active working with young people across the globe. Could you tell us how GCA is accelerating adaptation through education and youth leadership? And what is it that we should do differently when looking at support to young people?
Thank you, Edith, and also congratulations for the excellent work that you are doing with the Youth Adapt, and also to the all Youth Adapt winners. I think that is a signal of inspiration and how it's possible to accelerate adaptation solutions and action. As you said, I lead the Youth Leadership and Education Program at the Global Center on Adaptation. I am based in Rotterdam, in the largest floating office of the world, sending also a message about the importance to make climate resilient infrastructure. And regarding what do we do, Edith? For GCA, it's fundamental to empower young people to be part of the solution. And we have established a platform to connect young people from all over the world. Currently, we have a youth adaptation network with members in 130 countries. And through this network, we identified that one of the gaps is capacity building. And we developed a partnership recently launched between the University of Nairobi, the University of Groningen in the Netherlands, to develop a train of trainers model that can help to develop skills and competences of young people to accelerate and implement adaptation solutions. The first cohort took place in Nairobi, Kenya in September, hosted by the University of Nairobi. And what we hope is to accelerate and also to scale up this model in other African countries. Also, recently, the University of Nairobi with GCA developed a massive online course on adaptation and also youth leadership available to students free of cost. When we are talking about adaptation, one of the key points and elements is about implementation and acceleration action. And we are here at the COP29, the finance COP. And young people also are calling on global leaders to double adaptation finance and to make finance available to youth organizations to implement adaptation solutions. And the model of the Youth Adapt needs to be replicated. And many other regions also want to learn about this model. In addition, because when we are talking about young people, we are talking about innovation and solutions. This year we organized the first Youth Climate Adaptation Action Day. It took place on the 12th of October, and we mobilized young people from 73 countries, organizing over 300 events in parallel, and 48 African countries. Here we have the report that will be launched tomorrow by our CEO at the COP29. And what we need also, Edith, is to accelerate these discussions at the local level. Finally, there is a very strong interconnection about adaptation and education. It is not new You know, we have a very robust international framework. We have Article 6 of the Convention about education, training, and public awareness. Education was recognized as well as part of the Paris Agreement, Article 12 of the Paris Agreement. We have the SDGs, SDG number 4 about quality education, but also SDG number 13 about climate action. All of them are highlighting the importance of education and capacity building. But what we need is implementation. And how do we accelerate implementation is the model of the AAAP. It's through partnerships, bringing everyone together, governments, civil society, universities, and young people and educators. Next year, also as part of the second phase of the AAAP, GCA will also host some policy dialogues to discuss what adaptation education is, what are the competences needed, what are the needs of governments, and how we can support this process. Because education and adaptation is about people. And the final recommendation is, yes, if COP29 is the COP of finance, it is really a call for doubling adaptation finance and to making this finance available to the ones that need most, including local communities and young people.
Remember, it's the last surviving mic. So I'd like to open up before I ask my panelists to just give their last words. I'd like to open up to 2 questions, if there are any questions from the audience. Any reactions, any questions, any reflections? Okay. Yes. Eric, over to you.
So many thanks, Eric, and many thanks also for all of the panelists for the insightful comment. So I want to raise one question. Let's say we are able to mobilize this 1 billion. So will we have a market? Will we have innovators? If I'm looking the ticket that we have in the Africa Youth Adapt, we are talking about 100,000 for entrepreneurs. Will we have 10,000 entrepreneurs which will be able to absorb this money? So it's a rhetorical question because I'm working with the ecosystem for quite long already. And what I realize is we have to work more at the grassroots, at the seed level. So when you are talking about mobilizing this big fund, how do you create the pipeline of startups which are able to absorb? So it will be good to know from you in the first phase of the Africa Youth Adapt program, how much money you had and how many startups were you able to use all of the money that you had in the pocket? And did you make the compromises? So like, I just want to give the money and have the quality. So because it's just an appeal to say we have to work at the bottom of the pyramid to create a pipeline, so on different instruments, at least to have the critical mass which are able to absorb this fund so that we can. The universities is a big, we were talking here about unemployability in the panel before. How do we transform our universities into entrepreneurial universities? That is where the mass and the knowledge, the low-hanging fruits, so is on at least capitalizing, rethinking the design of the curriculum so that we can create this critical mass and design a pipeline so that we can come out, if we have the 1 billion and we have ticket of 100,000, that they will be able to be absorbed. I think it will be good to know, to get a bit your point, all of you, into on this question.
I think that's a very critical question. And I think you've also touched on something that we were challenged last year when we did unveil the winners for last year. Last year's last year's competition for the Youth Adapt program was Fourth Industrial Revolution Technologies for Climate, which means you're looking at really cutting-edge technologies. And we invited the youth envoy from AU, and she says this is excellent. She comes every year. She's always on our panel. And she says, what are we doing to reach the bottom of the pyramid? Those in rural areas, those who don't have access to technology, those who don't even know that these opportunities exist. So that's a challenge that we're really taking very seriously. On to your question. Let me give you the numbers. When we started off, we had the first call for enterprises in 2021. We had 2,000 applications. We could only take 10. And I can tell you the majority that we left out was strong innovations. In the second call, we funded 20, and we got 3,000 applications. And in the last call, which was focused only on women entrepreneurs in the fourth industrial revolution technologies, we got 1,000 applications. So it tells you the demand is there. The funding that we've been able to get, we've actually been able to use the funding. And we do very serious due diligence. Being a bank and also working with GCA, the due diligence has to be excellent. In terms of the selection of the innovators, we pick people from within the continent and outside the continent to be in the panel. So the panel is good. I can tell you the innovations are absolutely impressive. So what we realize is that we are sitting with a pipeline right now of only 41, but remember we dropped thousands. And I'm sure across, if you asked anyone here, they would tell you there are many enterprises out there that can be funded. And that's why I like this idea of working together in partnership. Because we are all going in the same direction, supporting enterprises, but we are working in silos. We are duplicating efforts. But if we came together and put our pipelines together, maybe the youth that I dropped in the last 3 calls could have been picked by any one of these partners and connected to funders directly. So that's the discussion that we started when we met in New York, to say we've got different pipelines. How can we work together so that the group of these entrepreneurs can actually be made available to investors that are probably looking for these innovations? A quick example, after New York, I got a call from an investor, big-time investor, who says, next week, I'll be looking at my next list of companies to support. And all I did, I just shared the brochure we have for Youth Adapt, which has all the entrepreneurs and what they do and the impact they've had. And he said, okay, I'll be looking at these as I look at other enterprises. Not everyone has that kind of access, and nobody even knows that this particular investor is actually looking for companies. And I think this idea of having a transparent platform where we can showcase these enterprises, where we can work together to bring our pipelines, can really make a difference. So let me stop there and probably ask each panelist to just give their quick reflection on that as you give your parting shot. Thank you.
Fully agree and support with what you just said. And from my side, just 2 quick comments. We should not look at like only 1 or 2 parts of the value chain. We need to look at creating a holistic value chain. And the start of the value chain is not in the university or later, it's in the school. And so we need to encourage and empower school curriculums and children to have this entrepreneurial mindset, while also explaining about the opportunities that exist. And in one of my previous organizations, we created a smart, sustainable city educational kit, which explained to teachers and then to school children everything about the new concepts of smart and sustainable cities. And then it all ended up with a competition, like entrepreneurial startup school children competition. And from there, we can start incubating these ideas and then going further and further along the value chain. So this example was used at one of the FIFA football championships, and I think this was a great example of how we can address these issues starting from the beginning of the value chain.
Edith, I think 3 keywords. 1, implementation. 2, partnerships. And the third one is about action. Implementation, we need to rethink education, as you mentioned, and to bring also the topic about adaptation. We have identified that even that many countries have progress on climate change education, there is a very strong focus on mitigation. It's about how we reduce emissions. It's about these consuming behaviors. But what about adaptation? We have seen that it's not about a discussion about the global south. It's about the global south, the global north. Droughts, floods is everywhere. And we need to prepare every person to cope and to adapt to the climate change impacts. Then we need to include this as part of the curriculum at the policy level. We need capacity building for teachers, but also educators and young people, and we need to accelerate implementation. And for that, we need to foster intersectorial collaboration, intergenerational partnership, but as well partnership among the responsible for the agenda of adaptation, finance, and education.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really love what we've been discussing, and it really encourages me to continue to fight the good fight, because, you know, it is a battle. It is an uphill battle, to be very honest. And I think that one thing to say is that the cost of capital, especially in Africa, is extremely high. And in order to get investment, sometimes, you know, we need to have de-risking elements. We need to have guarantees. We need to have insurance. We need to have all of these elements in place in order to bring that cost of capital on par with other regions. So I think that, you know, if I can say one thing, that at a policy level, at a government level, we really need to encourage them to find ways to eliminate some of this currency risk, or at least de-risk it to a level where the external investors can be comfortable. But at the same time, domestic capital investment is critical. You know, the 2.4 trillion that Dr. Vera Songwe identified is half international capital and half domestic capital. So I think in that vein, we need to look at the insurance providers and how can insurance invest more in adaptation and resilience. How can pension funds use their allocations more wisely around these types of investments? How can we be innovative in the carbon markets to create more trust and transparency so that those tools can be used in order to support adaptation? Standard Chartered did a framework on adaptation to see what kinds of projects are considered adaptive and resilient. And to be very honest, almost all nature-based solutions have some component of adaptation. So this year, with the Climate Champions and Ambition Loop, we decided, you know, we were going to focus that 50% of our pipeline is adaptation. You know, as she mentioned, most of the focus in the past has gone on mitigation projects. How can we increase the number of adaptive projects in the pipeline? And to be very honest, those types of projects are agriculture projects. Those types of projects are mangrove projects protecting coastal zones. So there's a lot of adaptive components to the projects we're already investing in, and we just need to kind of highlight that and bring that to the front and really support those adaptive things. And then finally, I'll say, you know, we really want to accelerate the number of projects. Like Edith was saying, what we find with most of our partners, CFA, XPRIZE, you know, they get a huge amount of projects in, and then they're only able to support a few. And so what we're asking all of the investors, all of you, all of the asset managers to really do is to see how you can expand your portfolio in order to support more of these projects that are falling through the cracks. Because they, like Edith said, they do have the due diligence, they do have the proper backing, but what they don't have is access to the market. And so the more we can provide access to these SMEs, and we know that SMEs are 90% of the market in Africa. So if we don't, if the SMEs are not a part of this change, then the change will not happen. So we really encourage them to, you know, come, reach out to us at Ambition Loop, reach out to the Climate Champions, reach out to Alexey, and reach out to all of our partners, and find ways to really push more of these projects through to close. And we're here to support and really help be partners, as Edith was saying, with these SMEs and small farmers, to see how we can enhance their bankability, enhance their investability, so that we can bring more capital into the market.
Thank you so much. As I mentioned at the beginning, so every year in Africa, they have a lot of young people or young generation that created innovation in climate change, in agriculture, in every sector, hanging from agriculture to poultry or food processing. So if I take the example of Senegal, every year thousands of young people come on the market, you know, to create their own enterprises in Senegal. So maybe they have difficulty to have access or some high level fund like the Youth Adapt Challenge program, but the solution maybe come from the incubator, like you, who can help those people to make the enterprises to be structured, to be trained about how to have access to market, how to search for fund. So all those problems should be settled at the basically in in the country level before they go to international level. So I think if you go through this process, so sometimes we can handle with this problem and make everyone have access to this high level fund from the Youth Adapt Challenge program. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone. Is it possible to share
Yeah, thank you very
some quick
much for
closing
that
thoughts?
point. I'd now like to turn over to David. Your last word.
Amazing. Thank you. I love this as a closing question. Thanks
We
for the
can't hear you.
speaker. And hello.
It's okay.
Can you hear me now? Can you folks hear me now?
Yes.
Maybe. Yes?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I think this is a great closing question, and I love the remarks, both the question about what kind of support are we providing to raise the level of support at a broad level for entrepreneurship across the continents and in emerging markets around the world, but also pairing that with Edith's comment that there are so many people who are applying, who are doing innovative projects, et cetera, but we're not yet at the level of providing that kind of capacity support at scale. Now, I love this idea of thinking not just that every university should have an entrepreneurship and accelerator programs and innovation programs, and especially those related to climate and adaptation, but every department of every university. So how can we really boost that level of providing that kind of capacity building support and at the multiple levels of the entrepreneurship journey? Now, one thing that we realize running these programs over many years is that, first off, it's actually quite easy to run an accelerator program, but it's difficult to run a really high quality accelerator program that are supporting enterprises at the different stages that they need support. And so there's two things that we're working on to try to build that momentum to provide high quality entrepreneurship education and training and support. One is around improving the capacity building and tooling for those local actors, the accelerator kind of programs, giving them tools to help make their make running high quality programs easier, leveraging data, leveraging shared libraries, more upskilling experiences for those facilitators and those trainers and mentors and program managers, et cetera. But then also bridging the divide by having more virtual and online mentoring, virtual and online programs. How can we break down barriers of borders and geography around investment, mentoring, training, acceleration support, et We even love the idea. For me, it's been a part of my belief that one of the best things that we can do to improve access and break down barriers of inequality for the last 20 years has been, can we get people way more excited and run way more virtual programs and conferences and events? Of course, I wish that I could have been there in Baku with all of you, but also there's so much more that we can do through really invigorating and vibrant, dynamic, fun, effective online facilitation activities. So we think that if we can have that balance of enabling local actors while breaking down barriers, enabling more of those virtual exchanges and support and mentoring and finance, et cetera, then we can open up access to a whole new a group of people. And we like this idea of thinking, opening up an entirely new class of accelerators, which we call community-based accelerators, which are high-quality programs run by basically any group. This could be a co-working space, a university, a department, a chamber of commerce, an NGO, any group of businesses themselves that want to provide some of that acceleration support to each other. And can we dramatically boost that so that, like Edith said, there are thousands of people applying, but there was just the capacity to provide support for a small number. Well, can we change that dynamic so that we're actually providing support to those thousands and thousands of people at the different stages of their entrepreneurial journey. And we fully believe it's possible and super excited about collaborating with all of the people who have been on stage today, this panel and the people who spoke before, and GCA and others, to see how we can really build that uplifting infrastructure at scale.
Thank you very much for a very exciting panel. I'd like to close with 3 takeaway points that I've picked. One is the need to support enterprises in their entire life cycle. And as a result of the experience we've had, we're actually expanding the Youth Adapt program to cover all the stages, including idea stage. The second is I like the idea of unlocking not just finance, so we should not just look at finance, but also support. And that if you're looking at unlocking finance, is not only for entrepreneurs, but also the ecosystem enablers and the financial institutions, for the financial institutions to also know how to lend and appreciate that. I also like the idea of the fact that when we are looking at financing entrepreneurs, it should not just be about the return on investment, but also what impact are we having. So dual focus on that. And then finally, the need to have this ecosystem collaboration that strengthens transparency and trust as well. So I'd like to conclude by welcoming everyone to join this particular movement to really try and see how we can support 10,000 enterprises in the continent. So with that, I'd like to hand over. I'd like to ask you to applaud the panelists. Thank you very much. And hand over to Dr. Alhamdu Dosuma, who is the manager of the Division on Climate Change and Green Growth at the African Development Bank. Over to you, Alhamdu.
Thank you very much, Edith, and thanks all for your active participation in this AAAP forum. As we conclude, let me first realize that I'm going to be short because I see, is it over? I thought there was a dinner or something after the forum. I missed it probably. Okay. So as we conclude this forum, let me really tell you that I was impressed by the quality of the conversation we just had. And also the commitment, the energy that everybody has shown in this forum. It was really a privilege to listen to all of you from Africa, but also beyond the continent. All of us bound by the same mission, make Africa more resilient to the impacts of climate change. Today, what we have been reminded of is that adaptation means for Africa something very important. It's not just a climate strategy, but it's all about protecting lives, strengthening communities, and ensuring hope for future generations. The AAAP has shown us that we are not sitting back as Africa. We are leading, we are innovating, and we are paving the way forward. And this is a very important takeaway from this conversation today. From the beginning, Vice President Kariuki, Professor Verkoyen have opened the forum by urging us to keep up the momentum, and the momentum is there. They reminded us that we have made significant progress together, but yet there are challenges that we still need to overcome. The demands are huge. Our high-level dialogue with CEO of NEPAD, Executive Director of CDR, and the Norway representative also reaffirmed that adaptation in Africa is not just essential, but it is transformative. That we need to mainstream adaptation across all national development plans in Africa, because adaptation is part and parcel of the development agenda in the continent. The AAAP business model and the related achievements have also shown the world what is possible when Africa takes the lead on adaptation. 68 projects were already supported in 41 countries, which is impressive. Communities are being supported in different ways. Innovative solutions are also being developed. And behind all of these innovation solutions and projects, we are empowering youth to lead on those solutions, as shown by the discussion we just had. And there is something very important, which is about collaboration. And this word has come up severally between governments, including the banks, the private sector, the civil society, research institutions, local communities, youth, women. All stakeholders are important in this journey. So it is important that we leverage on this diversity of stakeholders in order to bridge the adaptation finance gap. Because together we are able to bridge that gap, bridging divides, driving resources, and also sharing solutions to reach our goals. Throughout today's discussions, one clear message stood out. None of us can do it alone. Because as indicated by, I think, VP Kariuki, the AAAP's success has sparked interest far beyond Africa. This is a responsibility. We need to keep the momentum going. And with this model now being replicated in other geographies, I think we are it's an honor for us, but it's a challenge that we need to keep on. And I wanted to mention the award that we received, I think, at the Africa NDC investment ceremony in New York. This is also a testament to what is possible when we come together. But we know that public finance, which adaptation is relying on mostly, is not enough, and it is dying. We need to be innovative. So our challenge is to bring in more innovative and private sector financing. And the private sector has to become a true partner in this journey as well. Because there are innovative mechanisms that they are developing that are critical for this agenda, as well as other initiatives like the adaptation benefit mechanism that the African Development Bank is currently piloting. So I think I would like to conclude that together we can prove that these innovative financing instruments can work. It's not just about the concept, but this can become a powerful tool for a real change in Africa. We heard a lot of voices from different stakeholders. I am not going to summarize them, but this can also help us identify the opportunities to bridge the financing gap that has been already mentioned. As we look forward, let today's forum be a rallying call for action, as already indicated, because the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program is now entering a new phase, and for that, we need to consolidate our progress, tell our story, and let the world know the impact we are having. So on behalf of the African Development Bank and the Global Center on Adaptation, I would like to thank you very much for being here, for your insights, and for your steadfast commitment to double down on adaptation finance in Africa in the coming years. Thank you very much for your participation.